Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me, a very requested guest, because I'm doing some more guest interviews. I asked the community. I got several responses back. Probably the person that I would request to be on the podcast, because probably the person, Will, I would not be here if it wasn't for you. Like, wow. I would not be playing DFS at the level that I'm playing if it wasn't from October 2015. I get my friend in the supporters group of the local soccer team was like, do you play on DraftKings? You know the Premier League. You know, you're smart, you're a math person or whatever. It's like, why don't you play this game? Like, because I didn't follow really any other sports. And I got on, and I saw it was very similar to, like, the online poker lobby, since I played poker previously. And I started playing the DraftKings Premier League EPL contest, October 2015. $20, $40. And this fucking user, like, god damn it. What I don't, I'm building lineups, and I'm like, well, this guy's like almost always at the top, and like I'm playing double ups, and it's like always has the best double up lineup, and it's like what is he doing that I'm not doing? It's like, whoever thought of picking that guy or this guy? And then, but I also would see other sharp players with certain players and certain lineup constructions, and like I need to study Saramek's lineups. I need to how do I get better at soccer DFS if it isn't the person that seems to be fucking beating me all the time? And it was, you got me to download CSVs and study lineups, and within, probably 4 to 6 months, like, oh, let me check my double ups with Sarah. Oh, we're 2v2. We're 1v1. We're like, oh, okay, he went that way, I went this way, stuff like that. And it's like, okay, I think I'm getting it. And then, of course, I expanded to other sports. But is it weird for me to say, Will, that even though I would consider you the greatest soccer DFS player ever, and I think anyone in the lobby would think the same. Is it a bad thing that I got better? Would you have rather just taken my money?
No. Well, firstly, thank you for the very kind and high energy introduction. I've been told I have a very kind of flat, monotonous voice, and I think that's going to contrast quite a lot with your energy in this podcast, but I'll try to raise my game a bit. Yeah, no, that's very flattering of you to say that. I didn't know that. Firstly, secondly, yeah, it doesn't bother me. I mean,
I'm not playing. I'm such a nit. I'm not playing in your games really. Anyway, I mean, like. Yeah. I'm not in the lobby even now playing the $1,000 head-to-heads and the 3-mans with the Enigma Red Code 85. I mean, like me and you, we've never talked before. Occasionally on Twitter, every so often, right? But I mean, as far as DFS, I think like me and you go the furthest back when it comes to, especially like now that I'm at Roto Grinders doing stuff, and I did this course or whatever. I still make most of my money playing DFS, not doing touting type of work. But most people don't realize that like, oh, you play soccer DFS? And it's like, well, back in the day, like, that's all I played. Like it was me, you, Old T, Poop Dollars,
oh, yeah,
you.
Old T. Well, the guy
Keith hasn't played in a long time. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'd forgotten about him as well. But the guy that I looked up to when I joined was Pew Pew Pew.
Okay.
I mean, he must have been around for a bit before I was there, because I remember seeing him offering high stakes and just thinking, wow, just imagine if I'm ever playing like $530 head-to-heads or something, right?
Right. He's been on the show before. We talked about soccer DFS.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and he's still going now.
Yeah.
He's still in the high stakes. He's still playing.
Back then, we also had K Cannon played, right? We occasionally got Empire Maker, occasionally, and then we'll talk about a year in or whatever. We'll talk about the adventures with Sahil. I'm gonna bring that up.
Okay, we'll come to that later.
Right. But I just want to highlight the fact that, like, You like when it comes to DFS, like you're an OG. To me, you're an OG,
But
and
it was around for like a year before I joined, I think.
yeah, but
I
I
always
only
looked at
joined
it as
October
this,
two. It's 2022 now. That's like
yeah, I know,
7
it's crazy.
years.
So you joined in 2015
Yeah.
when I was already there as well.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, 7 years. Wow. Okay. Yeah, and it was a completely different ecosystem back then as well, obviously, which is I think what you want to get into a little bit
Right.
on this.
Didn't you love the days of full point crosses and 11-player rosters?
Yeah, well, that was ridiculous as well. Well, they were two separate periods, right? We had full point crosses for a while, right from the beginning, and the 11 person roster didn't start until I don't know 3 years in or something when they launched in the UK and they wanted to make the product more relatable to UK fantasy season long fantasy players, right? Like this.
Mhm.
How many players in a roster was it initially? Seven or something?
I
Eight?
don't know.
I
I
can't
know
remember.
when I originally started playing, it was 11. It was already at 11 at that point.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were okay. Well, that took a bit of time. So I must have been going for about a year, I think, before you joined. So I started in 2014. I don't know.
Well, you were
Okay,
there when I
because
came.
yeah,
Well, trust me, you were there, and you were the person that I'm like, I'm gonna every slate I played, got to check Saramek's rosters, and then of course you
okay,
learn the like in the very beginning of me playing DFS. I mean, I'm really just like, oh, set piece takers. Oh, that makes sense because the corner kicks and the crosses, and it's like,
yeah,
oh, okay, they have floor, and then forwards are very highly volatile, and then you start learning about the standard
yeah,
deviation of forwards is so much different
mm,
than midfielders, and then it's like, oh, now I get the sense of why people play cheap fullbacks, and like, oh, okay, because the full point crosses, and it's now you start figuring out the game, but that takes a couple of months.
yeah. And I remember not even DraftKings had figured out the game for like 2 or 3 years, right? Like, so I remember my business partner. So I've always done this with one other guy, Dan, and I remember him saying he's usually the one that's kind of I'm the one writing the code, doing the analysis, and then he's the one typically building the lineups and doing the entering. And I remember him saying to me about 2 years in, he's like, well, I think this is the first slate where salary has actually been an issue for us, right? Because the prices were completely, the salaries that DraftKings set were not reflective of how many points they were expected to score. They're reflective of are they a famous goal scoring player, right? So in the early scoring system, like when you said when crosses were 1 point and goals hardly mattered, the highest projected players for us were like the 6,000, 7,000 salary guys that played fullback and the Mark Albrightons or the Kieran Trippiers, these heavy crossing fullbacks or wide players that no one who just followed football casually really knew about. But if you were building projections based on the DraftKings scoring system, were the highest value players. But DraftKings just didn't recognize that in their salaries early on. So it took about a year or two before the salary constraint really mattered to us. Like I remember Darren just saying, this is the first week where we can't pick all the players we want to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the DraftKings salary system is finally starting to recognize who the more important players are.
Right. I remember the first or second season, like when I first started, and it's like I would see opponents that are rostering guys, like the Canes and the
Mm,
Agueros or whatever. And it's like,
Vardy's, yeah,
right, and I'm just like, can I just play Gylfi Sigurdsson and Dimitri Payet every slate? Like it's
right,
like they're
yeah,
not on the
those are,
fame like Swansea Sigurdsson. They eventually they got his price up to like 13,000 or something. But he's not even
yeah,
on the side. He's on the bottom of the table side. But it's just like the
right.
dude does everything and full point crosses as the playmaker. Like it's like just lock in 18 points, no
Yeah,
problem. And
I've forgotten how good Sigurdsson was early on. I mean, you say like I'm the OG soccer DFS player. I consider like Kieran Trippier possibly like the OG
well,
like
but what you talking
actual
about? You're talking about Burnley Trippier,
yeah, Burnley Trippier
right?
at right back, yeah, where he was just crossing it for, I don't know, 23 crosses per game. And he was aiming for maybe Chris Wood was no, I don't think he was playing then, but a very Chris Wood-esque alternative Burnley forward player, right? and it was just him. That was their only strategy. Like, give the ball to Trippier and then let him cross it to the tall guy in the box. And he was the most valuable player on DraftKings in the first year or something, right?
Right, and
But
he'd
his
be like,
salary was
right, salary didn't matter. He'd be
4,500. Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
No, and the thing was is that like I would play once I started to learn that, and it became I got into the in the low stakes world of I come from the poker mantra of like let the other players make the mistakes. So it's like don't try to outwit anyone. Just
Right.
just go right down the line and we'll talk into how in high stakes it doesn't work like that much anymore. Uh
Mm.
that like I just got in the just oh it's 5 game slate. How many favorite set pieces can I just jam into my lineup? I look at the
Yeah.
forwards. I go, let me act as if goals don't exist, and let me just
Mm.
play any forward that has set pieces or plays from a wide position for a favored team, most likely because they'll have more possession, and just jam them in, and then you look at double ups or whatever cash games if you want to call it, and I'd be playing against head to heads where people are playing Diego Costa for 9,800 or something
Yeah.
like the high
Yeah.
goal scoring. And it's like if you could the slates where they score 2 or 3 goals, like yeah, they beat me, right? But it's
Mm. And
like
you need them to have those days for them to keep picking
playing,
Diego Costa,
right?
right? And to keep playing you in head to head. So when it happened, you felt your edge was so strong that even when you lost, you were like, well, it's probably a good thing, right?
And
Because
and then when
if they
you
don't,
lost by like 40 fucking points.
right. And exactly, which is again what you want, right? Because then the other person thinks that you're an idiot or something and they've crushed you, right? But you don't get more money for beating someone by 40 points in a head to head than you do by beating them by 5 points, right? But the ego is probably given a bigger boost by the 40-point win, which is kind of what you want.
Right, you want to embrace variance, but in the higher stakes, the high once I played maybe 2 years or whatever, and then building up my bankroll, and now moving up to the $50, $100 double up. Now, I mean, sometimes they don't even offer those fucking things anymore.
Mm,
The lobby has been, in
yeah.
comparison to what it was 5 years ago, much less
Mm,
action in the lobby. But once you get up there, like you can't necessarily like rely on like my biggest leak moving up was relying too heavily on the low upside defensive midfielder style set piece takers,
mm,
right? Those
mm,
Matinho types, like the Ashley
mm,
Westwood types, the Cal Phillips. I don't know back then, but Juan Mata, like guys that are in like the 4 or 5K range that like outside of taking corner kicks, they really don't do much else. Their goal scoring
yeah.
odds are very high. They don't create many chances. And it's like, oh, can I lock in for 4,200? Can I lock in 6 points? Against the low stakes players, it's like, dude, they're putting in goal scorers. It's like, as long as they don't score goals, like they're going to be spending 9K for like 5 points. And I'll just lock
Mm,
this in. But once you move up to the more skillful players, it's
mm,
like you have to find a little bit more ceiling. Adding more variance uh, is positive. Like that edge between that 2v2 or even a 3v3 with the goalkeeper, because you have to count the goalkeeper, even though like, what in soccer DFS, the goalkeeper is like the most important position for your result and the one that you could predict the least, right?
mm.
It's
It's
like
like
you know that
putting
you're gonna live and die by the goalkeeper, but good luck project like you're someone I noticed like maybe 2 or 3 years ago that uh, I don't know if you do as much anymore, but you had I noticed in your play. It must be weird for you that I've studied your play for 7 years, so I know the progression of how.
it is a bit strange, but I've heard it enough times on Twitter now to kind of get used to it, right?
Ah,
But
but
but you know what's okay, but just on that topic though, what's weird to me in a way, what feels weirder to me is that people study our lineups and then they go, "Oh, I can see that you're doing X, Y, and Z," right? And that's just not how I think about
mm,
how I build lineups. The way I build lineups is I just try to project every single player as best as I possibly can, and then put it in an optimizer and see what lineup comes out. pretty much, right? And so, but on Twitter they'll be like, I see what you're doing with like, the high price goalkeeper and the low price fullback, crafty work there. Now that I've finally learned that strategy, I can employ it in my own lineup building. But it's just not, that's just not anything I actively thought of doing. It's just a natural consequence of our approach, if that makes sense. Like,
Right. Well,
that's
but
just how it plays out, right? But people then study the lineups and then interpret this kind of rule-based outcome where it's like, if this, then that. And then they also suggest that I have those rules in my head as well, which is why I built the lineups in that way. And I don't, I just try to build better projections and let the optimizer figure out what lineups to build.
yeah, but the byproduct of that is that the more, like you mentioned, the high price goalkeeper that you tend to play way more. To me, it's to me, it's not a, like you said, I can tell that you're not going through and I'm going to select 8 players, right? I know that you're coding, you're projecting every player and whatever, but if you're ending up on a high price goalkeeper way more often than the rest of the lobby, then I have to guess that you're projecting you're projecting the difference between the lower price and the high price goalkeepers, you're just projecting on a wider scale. While it used to be like sharper players, because of the variance at goalkeeper, would be more inclined to just pay down. Just pay down at the highest variance spot, pay down at defense in NFL, DFS. And a lot of sharper players still lean towards that side. And then when you're going the other way, that's not saying to me that you're like actively choosing that strategy. What's that saying to me is, oh, maybe we're all projecting goalkeeper a little too narrow between the 6K keeper and the $3,500 keeper, and maybe it's much wider, and maybe we should look into the data and see if that is more optimal to do. And I found by doing that, because that's what I did, and I found that from a double up type of perspective, like not for ceiling, but just for like a mean outcome, that the low price goalkeepers get crushed often enough that it's better to not have them in your lineup for double ups. And if you had to choose between even playing a center back at defender that had a decent enough, the projection didn't come down that much, you much rather just lock in the win points or higher clean sheet points. So it's like your strategy of slightly being different than a lot of the other sharper players. Like, I know that you're, like I said, I know that you're not like actively doing that, but it allows me to look at that and go, what am I missing?
Yeah. And to be honest, we do something pretty similar. I mean, for a long time, we've questioned our goalkeeper approach, right? And because you get screwed enough times by your goalkeeper. No matter what goalkeeper you pick, you're always going to get your fingers burned, on a regular basis, whether it's a high-priced goalkeeper or a low-priced goalkeeper. And it's an important part of the improvement process. It's an important part of getting better to when you have bad weeks and you want to look at your lineups compared to other people's lineups that you respect. And one of the big differences that always jumped out at us was we were picking high price goalkeeper when other sharp players such as Redcoat, who by the way I think has a very strong case for being the best soccer DFS player out there rather than us. I don't know, I don't know the true record, but
so do you know player. Will, do you know that some people have accused you two of being the same accounts?
Of course. I mean, it's so,
and it's not true. I've looked into it, and it's like a lot of people, especially with the soccer lobby being as small as it is, like they don't, and this happens in all the sports. If you're playing 3-mans, it's all about battling for the money. So like when I see you and Redcoat in a 3-man, I ain't joining. Just like if I see you and Pew in a 3-man, if I see PSU fans, and it's like I don't want to be the third person with 2 sharper players, because then it's like we're trading rake at best, or I'm slightly losing. So it's like if you either have 1 or 2 strategies for the 3-man, the non-guaranteed lobby is either scour for 2 of 3s and 4 of 5s and going entrance. Oh, there are people I don't know in here. even if you're in
Mm,
there or Redcoat's in there, it's like as long as one schmuck that I'm probably better than the schmuck that they'll pay the rake or whatever, and I'll join that. Or you do the opposite approach and say, I'm going to take over the lobby so that you can't avoid me no matter what. So I just get all
mm,
the stragglers 10 minutes before lock that take a random $20 3-man. But in order to fight for that, you have to fight against other sharks. Like there are going to be a lot of slates
sure.
where you're playing $5 grand worth of action against you and Redcoat in order to
Yeah,
kind of fight over that. But a lot of people don't get
yeah,
that dynamic, and they just see the same people in all these contests and go, oh, they're colluding, whatever. But it's easy to see looking at your lineups that there's no there's
yeah.
no there's no
But
evidence of collusion, and
there
also
are
he plays other
really,
sports that you don't.
yeah. There's that as well. What other sports is he playing at the moment? I don't
No,
know.
no,
Does he
he's
still
played. He's
play
played NFL.
NBA?
He's played. I haven't
Yeah.
seen him in NBA. I don't remember, but
Okay.
NFL definitely. He's
Okay.
played.
Yeah.
I've seen him. I've seen him in other sports. So I mean, like,
I have not only are we not working together, I have no idea who he is, right? And I want to know who he is. I want to meet the guy. You know, it's fun, and there's a lot of history there and a lot of mutual respect, I think, as well. Certainly respect from my end. So I would love to meet the guy. Just it's never he's has no interest in being a public figure, right?
no,
But
he's not on the Roto Grinders ranking. He doesn't have his
no.
account linked. It's like he's an enigma.
And when I've asked DraftKings, oh, is Redcoat going to be at this event? Or like, does he ever want to meet up? It's always like nah, he won't be there. And no, he doesn't want to meet up. He just wants to be very private. And I don't know whether that's like a business strategy or it's like just his nature. I'm not sure. Like whether he thinks that he's going to get a lot more head to heads and he's going to be able to fly under the radar and sort of do more damage if he's not a known person, or it's more he just doesn't see any value in it, any like life value, any kind of like
Well,
employment
what
value.
value do
I don't
you see in it? Because it seems like you'd be the type of person as an advantage player, sports betting,
know.
whatever. I mean, like, not no one knows your last name. Of course, they could find it, but whatever. It would just will.
Mm,
Like
mm.
you
They
also
don't know what I look like either, do they?
right,
Like,
but you
yeah,
also you did some shows with Tom Devo 1099 way back in the
yeah,
day.
yeah.
It's like what you don't have to like.
What do I see out of it? No,
Yeah,
yeah, I think. Well, what do I see out of meeting up with Redcoat would be just curiosity and fun, right? More than anything. And maybe there would be, it seems like we approach problems in similar ways, given how similar our lineups are. So maybe there would be some interesting conversations to be had for potential business ideas outside of DFS. I don't know, right? You never know with these things. Um, but just in general, what do I see out of being more public than say Redcoat? I don't think there's a strong business reason for it. I think it's more just ego, like being recognized. I think it's the opportunity to connect with other people. Like it is quite an insular lifestyle being a DFS player and staring at your computer and staring at code every day. And the opportunity, I'm a naturally introverted guy, but not like to an extreme extent where I don't want to talk to anyone all day. And being able to connect with people, other smart people, other nice people such as yourself, Jordan, in the community, I get some value out of that.
well, yeah, I think you're the first person that's ever complimented me on this show
Okay.
as
Okay. Well,
being a nice
it's
as
more from
being.
where that came from. I've always respected you. And actually, I don't know if you want to go here at any point, but one of the aspects of your game that I've always looked up to, and actually right now I'm trying to replicate a little bit, is more the game theory side, right? Like all my focus has been on just building better projections, and I haven't really got into ownership and how to deal with that properly. And I don't think that's a big deal in soccer DFS. Maybe I'm wrong with that, but the GPPs just aren't big enough to really worry about that too much. But certainly in golf, where I'm trying to carve out more of an edge, I'm really having to think more strongly about ownership and how important that is to your bottom line in DFS.
Well, I mean that's the core of how I play to begin with. Like I
Yeah,
don't
and I've
make my
seen
own
your results.
projections.
On your Twitter, you sometimes post your results in different sports, right?
Mhm.
And I've followed you for long enough to know roughly what your approach is, and I've listened to enough of your podcasts, I think, to know roughly what your approach is, and it's something that I haven't managed to achieve at all yet, but something I'm interested in, and yeah, I'm going to be studying your lineups soon.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's the thing about the soccer lobby is that, like, I wish I had the bankroll that I have now back in 2016, 2017, where we got a lot more action in the lobby. I mean, if
Yeah,
you notice, I play like pretty much EPL Saturdays, occasionally Champions League. It's like there's just not enough money in
no,
it to dedicate that much because like back in the like on a Saturday sometimes of course I'm a nit, so I'm not the type of person that's like I'm gonna play $1,000 head-to-heads against you for the sake of getting volume in. It's like if there's no good action, I don't have as much money yet on the line, right? Yeah, you know Evaldo Ibasso, like I've
yeah,
I've hung out with him before. He's like the CFO of a hedge fund. He makes over $1 million a year.
really,
He's a good player also, but he plays for the pride of winning. So it's like I mean the joke with him is that if it's and he follows the MLS more than EPL, and it's like he'll get $10,000 and he'll ask me, do you want to play $500 head to heads in MLS? I'm like, I ain't playing MLS contests. There's like no fucking liquidity. I ain't playing against
yeah,
you, right? So like now I find it a struggle for like cash games at least, right? For double ups, triple ups, that
for
type of
sure.
stuff. To get like $1,000 to $1,500 worth of like normal action. Yet like back in the day when I was playing like maybe $300 or $400 a slate, it's like, dude, I could fill up like 5 grand and be like, well, that guy sucks, and this guy, like I could take advantage of this, and the double ups were bigger, and it's like, oh yeah, 114-man double ups or whatever. Like now, it's kind of hard for me to invest that much time. I'll build 5 GPP lineups or something, or I'll play even like the 275, like 68-man contest. You take a look at that payout structure, and it's like, dude, you come in like 11th place, you don't even double your money. And it's like, what am I? What am I playing for? Have you gotten to the? It doesn't seem like you have, but like you only play soccer and PGA. Like,
Yeah.
have you gotten to like the main difference between the amount of volume slash return from 5 years ago versus now? Like, has to be dramatically different.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the numbers. There's certainly the sense that the cash game situation has got a lot worse, right? Like there's just not as many head-to-heads, there's not as many double ups, like you said, and 50-50s. I know last year we had a pretty good year. I think our best year in terms of soccer DFS profit. I don't know how, in terms of volume, it compares to 5 years ago or whatever. But I don't think we were maxing out 5 years ago to the same extent we are now, where we're just entering everything as getting in as many entries as we can, bar like some high stakes 3 players with red coat, which we would probably refrain from.
But how about the 150 stuff? I mean, like the contests, like these, we get some of these contests on Saturdays where I mean, it's the payout structures that I hate as a nit. 10,000 to
Mm,
first and like $100 to 10th place. Just I mean, like it's like this
yeah,
steep
yeah.
curve.
I see a lot of hate of that on Twitter, and I just I try not to think about it too much, to be honest, because I don't really feel like it's something I can affect or control. I mean, I think you're closer to the DFS ecosystem, and maybe you have the ear of a few guys at DraftKings, so you could have more influence over that. But
It hasn't.
um,
Trust me, it hasn't worked. The point
yeah,
that I'm making is that like maxing, like playing as many like plus EV lineups, there has to be a tipping point where the payout structure is so top heavy that like if you just simulated just variance, like you go broke too often. Like you just don't make enough return. Now
right.
I'm saying this as a theory because I'm not I'm looking at it from a mathematical approach, not a realistic like doing it. But I see you in
Mm,
contests where it's a $15 entry and you're playing like 2250 in entries for a contest that pays 10K to first. And if you come in one lineup in fourth place, that's not even 2250. And it's like, how profitable can that be? But from the look on your face, maybe you come in first and often enough. That makes up.
No,
like that. That's what I'm saying. It's like,
lately, anyway.
Like, is there a point where playing the max amount of entries is not the optimal, where playing somewhere in the middle, like you get to a certain point where you can't make plus EV lines
at some point, right? Like,
right.
If we want to talk about the original DraftKings, there was no max entry limit, right? Like back in the day, there was no 150 cap. You could just enter as many lineups as you wanted. And then, of course, there's going to be some point at which the marginal extra lineup is going to be negative EV, and you shouldn't enter another one. I just haven't put in the time really to figure out where that is. And our results are good enough over time to suggest that, okay, maybe we would have made more money over the last 5 years if we'd stopped at 120 or 110 on average, right? But in order to figure that out, it's going to take me more time that I could probably better spend on just improving our projections, right? Or working on a new project. And so I've never really got around to actually trying to figure that out. And if we were losing money, then it would create a greater need to actually figure that out. But so far things, apart from like the last 6 weeks, which have been terrible, so far things have gone well enough to not like justify spending a load of time trying to figure out where that marginal negative lineup comes in.
No, that makes sense. If your results show that you're still profitable, you don't fix what ain't broke, right?
I mean, yeah, they show that we're profitable across the 150 lineups, or it shows that max entering is a profitable strategy for us, right? That's what results show, but it doesn't necessarily show that it's the most profitable strategy for us. You know, maybe if we'd split tested doing only entering half what the max entry cap is versus entering all of what the max entry cap is, maybe we would have come out with more profit. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem important enough to figure out at this stage.
In your coding, do you do contest-based simulations?
No,
like you did, like really. What I'm asking for people that may not know, do you do something projection-wise where you compare the actual to like what would be the simulated result of your lineups versus what actually happened to the lineups that were in the contest?
It's so hard to build that because you'd have to get the correlation right between all the DraftKings metrics, right? Like coming up with a mean projection, an average amount of points, is relatively simple. But actually figuring out if a guy makes 7 crosses in a game, what should his fouls drawn be? You know, like, because if he outperforms his crosses, is he now more likely to outperform his fouls drawn as well? Or like, if he doesn't get a goal, is he likely to make more crosses because the fact that he hasn't scored means the team is more likely behind. So they probably have more possession. They're probably crossing the ball more. Like, to generate a good simulation of DraftKings soccer matches, you know, football matches with DraftKings scoring system would just be so complex that it would take more time. Again, it's one of these things where the time it would take to do it wouldn't justify what you'd learn from it ultimately, probably.
Right, because that's what
Unless you could think of other uses of it.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been one to say, I mean, I don't mean it literally, but soccer projections are not the same as like NBA projections. Like that the what I call it the butterfly effect. Like to me, soccer has the biggest butterfly effect of all the daily fantasy sports. Butterfly effect meaning where one event could dramatically change the entire course of the game's play. A lineup change, a formation change, right? We see like, oh, okay, well, so, you know, that Liverpool has a Champions League game, and now they're running out, you know, like a B lineup. It's like, well, how does that affect the other team? And then let's say we have games where, oh, Man City are favored by God knows how much, and the underdog scores first. And it's like, well, that dramatically changes like the game state of how Man City are going to play, how Norwich, whoever's play, like if the underdog scores first in those types of situations, typically it's like it's going to be 11 man behind the ball, and Man City are just going to they're going to create like 74 chances now because they're just going to be pummeling up.
And De Bruyne is going to have 23 crosses.
Right, exactly. And we see with like Mark Albrighton with Leicester, like it's like the best whenever you roster Albrighton, it's like you want the other team to score first, right? Because then next thing you know, he's just bombing up and just crossing every single time. But like if you don't know the like we're talking about actual soccer, and I'm one that always says you don't need to watch the games, you don't need to know nothing about the sport, just trust the projections or whatever. But not all projections in soccer are created equally because at Roto Grinders, we have soccer projections. I don't do them, but PSU fans and Fear My Turtle do them.
Okay.
And they're respected DFS soccer players. Yeah. But you'll see a forward with an 11-point mean projection. And I look at that and I go, this guy never scores 11 points, right? It's Patrick Bamford. It's like it's 3 or it's 18. Yes, the mean is 11. And then you'll look and compare that to like a Gabriel Martinelli at a similar projection for 11 and be like, well, now he could score 11, right? Like the Nicolas Pepe, like someone like that, where it's like they're not as goal dependent, but they look, from a mean projection, they look exactly the same, but the range of outcomes for the players are so much different compared to other sports like basketball or even football with touchdowns that what I would say is like projections don't matter. They matter, but like you almost need to know like the context of that projection. And GPP lineups, well, you would rather, if you had a choice between two 8-point mean projected players, it's like, well, GPPs, you should play the ones with the higher standard deviation. The guys that maybe take 3 shots a game versus the guy that gets to 8 points through tackles 1 or something like that. But to a layperson, that doesn't really show in the numbers. And do you, I mean, if you're working with mean projections, that's one thing. But I can tell from your lineups that you're working with some amount of
No, we try to express variance as well, right? And then you also got to think about correlation between players as well. So like if you've got, I don't know who your example was of like Patrick Bamford, right? If he does get 12 points, does that mean the other Leeds players are going to also overperform their expectation or perhaps underperform, right? Because once one person gets a goal, perhaps Leeds sit back and they don't have as much possession and the fullbacks don't do as well or something. I mean, certainly the goalkeeper might now be projected higher because Leeds are more likely to win given Patrick Bamford's got a goal. But yeah, you need to think about not just the variance or the correlation within players and their potential to either go big or small, but also that the effects on the rest of the lineup that you've built. And I think that's particularly important in Showdown, right? With Showdown GPPs, you're trying to pick that group of players that have the chance to all do well at the same time. And that their point, if one outperforms, the other's more likely to outperform, and all the other players in the lineup are either more likely to outperform or just are less, or hopefully are not more likely to underperform because Patrick Bamford's got a goal. So yeah, this is it's a really hard problem to solve. Trying to build, like you asked earlier, Jordan, like trying to build an actual simulator of all the possible results across
it seems impossible to me.
It's impossible. So you have to come up with, I mean, this is where you do have to kind of come up with rules, right? You do have to come up with like a if this, then that situation and try to make them as sensible and as data informed as possible, but realize that you're still going to be missing some stuff.
Do you, after reviewing a slate or looking at sharp players' lineups, I mean, on certain slates where you're significantly different than the field, are those slates where you're more likely to chalk it up as like, well, your projections were better and everyone else got lucky? I mean, I'm phrasing this really wrong. If you remember the slate, I'm not saying specifically. You remember this is like you said, the past 6 weeks were horrible. There was a slate like I think 2 or 3 weeks ago with Chelsea, right?
Okay.
With Mount and Alonso, and like you didn't have either player in your main whatever cash lineup type of thing, and I just thought it was so odd because like everyone else did, and like you. Obviously, they both crushed, and you were all the way at the bottom. But it was one of those times where, like, I go, are we all, like, it's one thing to like when things are like 40% owned. Like, do you go back and go, you were
definitely
right? Okay, that's what I'm asking.
We do review it, and like the other thing that I look at is not only are the players that everyone else was on that we weren't on that did well. But were there some players that were like 3% owned that we picked and did badly, right? That's like a more concerning thing. Like if we've picked like a defensive midfielder for like 4,600 and no one else picked him and he got 0.8 points or something, right? Now we've got to think about, okay, are we happy that we picked this guy? Like, does it, when we review it and look at it, does it make sense that we picked him? Or is there some potential bug in our code or some potential improvement we could make to avoid picking him in those kind of situations in future? And there has to be some of that for sure. If you're just like blind to everything that's going on around you, or you're not learning from other people that are trying to solve the same problem as you, I think you miss out on a lot of potential improvement. But you can definitely overcompensate in that direction as well. You can spend too much time trying to figure out exactly why you lost this slate when it probably 95% of it is actually just you got unlucky.
Right. Well, that's why I'm talking about incidents where it's not like everyone's kind of around 30% and we're dealing with like 3v3s. It's like, okay, I saw that or whatever. It's one of those situations like I always tell from an ownership perspective to like newer DFS players, especially if you're playing cash games, that if you go into your double ups and all the ownership gets unlocked and you have 3 single-digit owned players and you don't have 3 players that are 80+% owned, like Occam's razor says, you fucked up.
Yeah. Although 5 years ago that wasn't true, right? Or 7 years ago that wasn't true because no one had any idea who to pick. And so learning anything from ownership figures and you picking some guy, like if you pick Robbie Brady and he was only 5% owned and he got 23 points, you probably didn't make a bad pick, right? Like he just people hadn't figured out how to play the game. But now there's a lot more consensus, obviously, how to play the game. It's the same with PGA DFS as well, I think. So yeah, you should trust ownership figures a lot more now today than you perhaps needed to 7 years ago. And you can learn from where you're different from everyone else a lot more today than you could 7 years ago.
I think a lot of the edge now in soccer GPPs is one that game theory element, and also people not utilizing correlation enough. Especially since once they added the chances created or the shots assisted, like the more dominant a team is, the more DraftKings points they can score. Even though when they nerfed crosses and then they added the shots assisted, I theorized that like this makes favored teams, the more favored they are, the more possessive they are, the more attacking they are, the higher of a ceiling they have, regardless of the goal scoring odds. And it makes it more likely that correlated players from those teams are going to hit their ceilings more often. So like I try to find, like I said, I'm not doing as analytical of an approach that you have. You have your code, your projections. You're trying to do that better than anyone else, which you've proven to have been able to do. But I lean more towards the size of like intuitively, like going like, okay, well, if I'm going to pick this goal scorer, that is their anytime goal scoring odds are way higher than their price. And a $5,800 guy with a 46% chance of scoring for their ownership or whatever, it's like, well, that, like you said before, when that guy scores, like there's going to be a potential assist, right? So it's like, where can that assist come from? Like, well, it could come from, a lot of times it's coming from a wide area or a set piece or something like that. So it's like, oh, we'll pair the forward with someone that is more likely to, a center back ain't doing it, most likely. A defensive midfielder probably ain't. So you pair with that, and then you go, well, if that team is up one, they're more likely to keep the clean sheet. They're more likely, so it's like, so I've gotten used to like goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward, or two forwards or whatever from one team.
Yeah.
And then looking for a 2-0, 3-0. Like, in your head, visualize what this game looks like and who benefits from that. And then there are also games where it's like, yeah, I think this is the type of game where no defense gets, like, the total's high. It's a Leeds anyone game. I mean, it's a Leeds. Right. It's probably a 2-2, 3-2 type of game. It's like, well, I'm just going to take two guys, two midfielders / forwards from both the teams, no defenders. And then, like, the chalky, everyone's playing Liverpool thing, I'm just going to play the defensive, like, stack of that and go, like maybe Van Dijk scores on a set piece and then Salah and Mane don't come through. They win 1-0. So, like, kind of like using combos of, like correlated pieces that fit together. Because I've studied your lineups and you do that type of stuff, but you also, because you're coding in, like, ranges of outcomes, you also get the situations where you're playing a defender against a forward where, like, it's negative correlation for the clean sheet, but like we talked about before with game states, well, if that forward scores, this fullback is going to start bombing forward and attacking more. That's the only thing that I have that to me, that's my blind spot of, like, I take a look at goalkeeper, defender as like a thing. And, like, if a defender isn't eligible for the 3-point clean sheet, like, I don't want to play them. Like, and you're more likely to have this 4,200 Kamara or something for Watford. He puts up 12 points in a game where it doesn't need the clean sheet. And you're sitting there going, yeah, I just hand building 5 lineups. Like I just don't get there. But that has to be, I mean, like, I'm assuming that's part of the code because you're weighing the negative correlation there, but for the clean sheet, but there's a positive correlation to if this other team scores 2 goals early, like the opposing team is just going to go balls to the wall trying to come back, and that's going to raise the ceiling of all of their players.
Yeah, exactly. Another way to think about it is, like, if you're going to win this GPP, you need the defender to score 12 points, 15 points, like you said, right? How often when a defender scores 15 points, 12 points, do they get the clean sheet as well? Does it require them to get the clean sheet in order to get 12 points, 15 points? I mean, probably not heavily, right? It's not heavily contingent on them getting a clean sheet to get 15 points, 12 points. It's only 3 points they get from it. So, yeah, in that situation, I don't think maybe the correlation is so much to worry about. The negative correlation is so much to worry about in picking an opposing forward. But that's not to say that I've solved it, and I know for sure. These are just seat of the pants, maybe using a little bit of data to try and inform the decision a bit better, and then just coding in those rules into the lineup building process and then forgetting about it. And hopefully the results go well, and then you can just go and focus on something else.
Right. I mean, we've seen with negative correlation, I mean, in the past, where the nuts was Cristiano Ronaldo and the opposing keeper.
Right.
Right, we've had those games where he takes 11 shots, scores 3 goals, and he's against the cheapest keeper, and the cheapest keeper puts up 14 points, even conceding.
I think, though, but I think picking a forward and an opposing goalkeeper is sufficiently negative not to justify ever doing it, even in those rare Ronaldo cases, right? I remember the Champions League, one of the Champions League finals, where the person that won the GPP was like Gareth Bale coming off the bench and scoring 2 goals, right? And it's like, okay, how would you, like, correlate that one? So, like, okay, what's the game state there? It's like Real Madrid don't score or something. I can't remember what the game state was exactly, right? So they then have to bring on Bale, and then he would score to end the match in 90 minutes and blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, it's going to happen 1 in every 1,000, 1 in every whatever, but it's probably not worth ever picking subs for that reason. I don't know, though. Maybe it is worth.
So you never pick subs in Showdown?
Correct. But that's because we've never built a model to project sub points, right? Like, we don't have projections for subs, so it's not an easy adjustment to make to suddenly put them in there. Like if we did have a reasonable way of projecting sub points, and our code was already set up to do that, then I might think more strongly about whether you should have a few GPP lineups where you put in some goal scoring subs. But again, it's like,
Is it worth doing?
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Do you project player minutes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you project the start. Okay, that's very similar to Roto Grinders. We project the starters' minutes, but not the. It's not like everything has to equal what 10 outfits, 600, 900 minutes. Like it's not like we'll project someone for 75 minutes, but it's not like we're giving those 15 minutes to some sub on the bench. It's just that guy's projected for 75.
Yeah, we don't try and round it off like that. We don't have sub minutes.
Okay. So going back to the soccer lobby, the very interesting soccer lobby where everyone blocks one another. So that's one of also the main reasons. Like all my 10 blocks on DraftKings are just to so I don't prevent auto matching against you and Red Code and Pew. It's also the type of thing where I have to block Red Code because he will take all my games. Like there's some people that I don't have to block because we just what's the point type of thing. It's like typically we withdraw by the time the auto match happens, but sometimes it does, and whatever happens. But there's also some people that are like, give no fucks, right? Just I don't care. It's like dude, we're just trading. I'm looking at my Roto tracker. It's like we're trading. DraftKings won. We both lost money. Like this is pointless, but they'll still do it. But back in the day, the biggest boost to the soccer lobby was when Sahil was, made a ton of money in the major sports and enjoyed soccer. And he freely admitted on interviews back then that he wasn't a very good soccer DFS player, and he just enjoyed soccer and enjoyed playing. Those were the days where I wish I had the bankroll I had now that I did back then, because that's when they started the interleague stuff. They started adding that type of stuff, and little birdie in the through the grapevine is that probably those slates, the league, when they started La Liga, and they added then they made it interleague with the French, whatever games were on that day. One of the main impetuses of them adding those slates was because of the action that was in the lobby because of Sahil. Right. So can you I mean, we're not disparaging the person, but he wasn't he wasn't very good.
Like you said, he did very well in other sports, right?
Right.
And he didn't see soccer DFS as a way to make money, really. He just saw it as a potential form of entertainment, I think. But like you said, you wish you had the bankroll you had now back then to take proper advantage of it. For us, it was similar, but also we were just too conservative, right? We had too much respect for the guy because of all his tales of doing so well in other sports. And when we saw him turn up in the lobby, we initially probably blocked him straight away. I'm like, oh my God, it's Sahil, right? And he's the god of DFS, and we shouldn't go anywhere near him. And then we started looking at a few of his lineups, and we started going, wow, he's picked this guy, right? And what can we learn from this? We're studying his lineups in the same way that you studied our lineups, thinking, wow, okay, here's this maths genius or whatever, and he's picking, he is picking Diego Costa in cash, right?
Right. He's playing three. He's not only picking. He's typically playing three goal dependent forwards. It's like Vardy, Costa, back. And I'm looking, going that's dude, if these guys don't score, I'm gonna beat you by 48 points.
When the match starts, I'm just waiting for an update on my phone to say that Diego Costa scored and Jamie Vardy scored, right? Because Sahil's a genius and he's the oracle, and it's just inevitable that these guys are going to score and he's going to win everything. And then a couple of weeks of this, we're like, you know what? whatever he's doing doesn't seem to be working, and we can't make sense of it. So maybe we should start taking him on a bit, right? Maybe we should take a few of his head-to-heads, and he was willing to play 10K head-to-heads, multiple of them in the same slate. And so but we still weren't too confident. We were still too conservative. And we took a few, we won a bit, started increasing it a little bit, slate by slate. And then eventually we were taking him on for, I think, 20K, 30K a slate. But it was too late by that point. He'd started to realize this was too much of a black hole of DFS DraftKings balance for him. And the head-to-heads sort of quickly dried up. And our mistake was just not acting quickly enough. I think there were people that made more out of him than we did. Probably Redcoat, for instance, who isn't as conservative as we are. And we just waited for too much confirmation, too much reassurance that actually he was a fish and not a super sharp before we acted. And I think that's a lesson that we've tried to take on to just other sports betting opportunities that have arisen since then. If something looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, you shouldn't have to wait until it smells like a duck as well before you act, right? You can't wait for like that 100% assurance before you act on a really good opportunity, because by then the opportunity could be gone. And that was the case with Sahil, and we try not to make that mistake with other opportunities since then and in future too.
Well, a lot of times in DFS, like amateur players, like recreational casual players, don't understand like having a big advantage in a head-to-head could. I mean, like people think that like, oh, if I played some random person off the street, like, oh, you'll beat them 95 times out of 100. It's like, no, I'll beat them like 70 times out of 100. Like even there, as long as they use all their salary.
And in golf, it's like 55 out of 100.
Right.
Like if they're the biggest fish out there, they're still going to beat you 45% of the time, as long as they're using all their salary in golf.
Right. As long as, like in soccer, like for instance, in soccer DFS, if someone used all their salary and played starters, right? Like your lineup, like I'm at best maybe 70%. I mean, that maybe even be high, but I'm just using I have a 70-30 or something. So like when we the difference between like what at a 70-30 you could tell, like when you say the duck example of like you could typically tell at that point, like after like one or two slates of like I've never seen this person in the lobby before. I could see their lineup the first time and go, yes, more likely than not, this person doesn't know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm more likely at the 70-30. But like when you're like 60-40 or even like 58-42, like sometimes it's sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes it's like
sure.
Like yeah, you went a weird 3v3. I didn't even think about this player in cash, but like he has upside and like yeah, he scored 11 points because he got a couple of chances. I could see how that fits in with that, like, but you start looking at their lineups and going, like, if they start beating you by a couple of points or you beat them by like, it's hard to tell sometimes at that length. And that's why I viewed like your lineups even currently in playing. Like I always thought, because compared to the rest of the lobby, I'm more likely to see something weird. And I'm not weird in a bad way, just though, like it's more likely a weird construction. It's more like I come from the perspective of like, let me jam in as many points as I can. So it's like if I could get up and play play like Bruno Fernandes or some like high level set piece taking mid, like James Ward-Prowse, can I jam in Madison? I don't know Madison now, but like in the past, it's like, can I get Willian? Can I get Gylfi Sigurdsson? Can I get Dimitri Payet? And then at the end of the day, I'll play the $2,900 fullback in order to just jam all these guys in. And like typically that wins 60% of the time against that's normal lower stakes people. But like your lineups sometimes are like, wow, I prioritize getting Trent Alexander-Arnold in for 9,200. But like I look at Saramek's lineup and he doesn't have he's 70% owned. and he doesn't have Trent Alexander-Arnold, but then I see it's like, well, if Trent Alexander-Arnold doesn't get like 16 plus points and he only gets 10, like Saramek's lineup actually has a higher chance of beating me because you're now able to get some $5,200 midfielder that isn't like my $3,300 please get me 4 points type of midfielder. And I look and I go, like, I know you don't do it consciously, right? You're not building that like that, but I could see how the way that your coding would work of what, like, instead of looking at Trent Alexander-Arnold's mean projection, that it's looking at a little bit wide, a little bit of a range of outcome and going, which is more beneficial to have the midfielder that could easily just end up with 1 point or get two guys that could reasonably end up at 10 points more often, that all you have to do is avoid the Trent Alexander-Arnold ceiling game. And when you don't, when he gets 33 points, you're fucked. But it just doesn't happen often enough that I look at your lineup and go, yeah, that's kind of an ingenious construction that, not saying that it's better than mine, but it's competitive. Like, it's like, I understand why this is good, and I understand why if you're playing a ton of head-to-heads, you're going to be different enough that when you win, you're going to sweep the entire lobby.
Mm-hmm. I think that's also why we haven't had to worry too much about ownership and game theory in the GPPs, like, because our approach is perhaps different to others. We're like naturally contrarian, right? We've never had to like actively not pick a really high owned player because it's happening often enough naturally just through our code.
But also you're
GPPs.
The guys typically, I mean, this is from me studying not every slate, but like a lot of slates on your large field builds, that typically your lineups are leveraged the way that I like. If there is a forward that is over-owned, you typically have less of that forward naturally. Like, you say you don't doing it on purpose, but it's the type of thing where it's not being projected as much as the field is. Like, you end up with those 6% owned, underdog forwards on a pick'em game more often than like, oh, everyone's playing, Salah, right? And Salah is on a 3-game slate, like 58% owned or something. And in your 150 lineups, you'll have like 20% of the guy. But you'll have like all these other forwards in all these other games are like 10%, 12%, 8%, and you'll be like double on all of them and have combinations that don't have Salah in it. And I look at that and I go, it's hard for it. A lot of slates, it would be hard for me to tell that you're not even using some type of game theory, like to be less on this.
I'm glad you have that impression. Yeah, because we don't. That's not something that we do deliberately. So it's nice that that effect is happening enough naturally.
Right, but sometimes I get confused because sometimes the guys that I think are over-owned, you have like 80% of. And I'm like,
okay, yeah.
But it's the type of thing, just like you don't play NBA, where NBA, since it's so much more of a normal distribute, like it's so much less variance, that a guy at like 4K that's going to get 40 minutes, like most likely if he's 88% owned, he's still under owned. Like the dude should be like 90. Imagine, like, I mean, I don't even know if there's a soccer example. Imagine Kevin De Bruyne at 3K as a midfielder, and just like, why shouldn't, like, if he's 77% owned, you'd be like, oh, I got to fade the 77% owned. Like, no, he'd be in every one of your lineups because he would project for like 17 points.
Differentiation from somewhere else.
Right. But I don't, that's why I said, I don't know if it's a compliment that you're not doing it on purpose, but your lineups still adhere to typically that type of thing.
Yeah, it's complimentary and reassuring. Like, it's not necessarily a compliment, but it's nice to know that impression is you're getting that impression from our GPP lineups.
Right. It's just that I'm not building 150 of them. Right. I go in one round like, okay, like I'm going to play, $9,500 Ivan Toney. If he beats me, then fuck it. He beats me. Why is he this price? I have no idea. And why is he 28% owned? Right. I look at that and then I look at your lineups and I go, okay, well, you don't even have much of them. So it's like, yeah, why should you? Because I don't know what any projection system would have $8,700 Brian Mbueno. Right, on this past, I'm just going by this past slate. It's like Like even now, it's 7 years in, 7+ years in. Sometimes the DraftKings pricing is just like, I don't know who came up with some of these things, some slates.
Hmm. Hmm.
So Will, uh, the future. I mean, you seem to be playing like, you seem to be playing soccer DFS like just it's yeah, it's my thing that you and your partner play, and you do the sharp, the charts on Twitter that I like. You used to do that for soccer a little bit, right? Now you do it for
Yeah,
PGA.
yeah.
Uh, I know you're getting into more sports betting stuff, but I mean, do you from all intents and purposes, from what I could gather, is that to you the DFS ecosystem is like you're at the top of the pyramid. You could give a fuck what the bottom of it is. Like I'm playing 150 lineups. I'm playing all the head to heads, and just are you just you have a system? It's a push button type of thing, and just you let it
Yeah.
run. And is there any view of like pivoting? Like is there a better use of the money that you're making in soccer DFS to be put elsewhere? Is that the reason you got into PGA? And then why wouldn't you get into like a more liquid, softer market like NFL? Like NFL would be the most casual, most amount of dead money in there, the most
Yeah.
liquidity. Like instead, is it that obviously you start with what you know, right? Because I mean that's what I started from. I knew soccer. Uh, is it that sports betting offers you higher ceiling opportunities because you see much more upside there? Or are you just like, is it a matter of coding and model building that it's like, well, I did soccer, I know PGA, and it's like, instead of the squeeze, the juice and the squeeze, it's like, is it worth trying to do NFL when there's so many other, like so many people have quote solved, and I mean, there's enough good projections out there. Soccer and
Yeah.
PGA, like you're making soccer projections, and it's not like you could just go out there and Google DFS soccer projections and just pick up this is pretty good, right? Like it really, since it's not as popular, people don't focus on it. Yet on all these
Right.
major sports, you're less likely, or do you think this? Do you think you're less likely to build better projections in the three major American sports that have more liquidity on DraftKings? You just find it like you're not going to get enough of an edge there.
So yeah, about the future, I think firstly with soccer DFS, as you alluded to earlier in this chat, it doesn't seem like the ecosystem's growing. If anything, it's regressing. Hopefully, it's plateaued now. But one of the reasons for doing all of this in a coding way, rather than say like a more mental model manual way, is so that in order to keep things going, it requires minimal consumption of time. In order to continue trading soccer DFS, we can hopefully just rerun the code and update our projections each week. And so time is really just spent on the trading front, and that's really only a couple of hours a slate, something like that. And then the question then is, okay, so what do we do with that extra time that's now freed up by us no longer really focusing on soccer DFS? Yeah, we definitely have thought about the other or the three big US sports, um, but neither of us really know much about them. And that's not a great reason in itself. Um, it would require us to trade at weird times as well because we're UK based and it's not a great like lifestyle thing to stay up that late to do all the trading. And I think 3 or 4 years ago, golf jumped out to us as a sport we both knew a little bit about. We could use some of the same coding, some of the same skills that we built from soccer DFS to apply it to that. And we just naturally got sucked into golf, I think. And originally we didn't think it was going to be a very big project before we got profitable, but then we realized it really was going to be a big project before we became profitable. And so it gradually consumed more and more of our time. we focus more and more resources there. But once we kind of got that to a stage that we were happy with, we realized what we'd built, we could then start applying to more conventional sports betting markets as well, which is ultimately what we'd always hoped to kind of get into. We saw DFS initially really as just a stepping stone into more liquid, bigger sports betting markets. And moving from golf DFS into golf sports betting seemed like the best, and by best, I guess I mean most, the smallest step really, like solving golf DFS, what it took to try and get profitable in golf DFS, ended up giving us a product that didn't require a very big step to then actually become a profitable golf sports bettor as well. So that's pretty much where we are now. And both soccer and golf are big enough markets that there's not really a need to, I mean, the question is, do we expand into more DFS markets, or do we expand out in the sports of golf and soccer into other markets outside of DFS, right? Like where is the expansion going to come? And I think there's so many opportunities to bet soccer and bet golf that we don't currently model, that wouldn't require a huge step from our existing code, from our existing skills and infrastructure, that it would make more sense in terms of the juice and the squeeze again to apply our time and resources there rather than launching into a whole new sport like NBA or NFL.
But I think that highlights the differences between like our just approaches to this in particular. Like to me, I've very little interest in sports betting. I used to be part of a small syndicate a long time ago. I mean, long, 2005-ish, which was more about basically arbitrage, just basically betting both sides and capturing the money in between. So it just involved knowing, but this comes back to the philosophy of like how I view DFS and how we're different, is that like how I made money in sports betting back then is you're exploiting the public. You're exploiting, like, if I could figure out what books move what lines at what time based on action, I could capture early here, late there, get money in between, and just as long as the hardest part was moving the money around, right? And getting the money down. Like that's always the hardest part of like, you don't want to bet on the same book that like the line moved, because then they view you as, you're trying to fucking steal from them, even though it's like, if you're going to take my bet, you can take the other person's bet, whatever. That's a whole nother subject. But like, I don't want to get into sports betting. I want sports betting to turn into DFS. I'm thinking that at some point there will be DFS 2.0, which would be more like the classic one would be like the Westgate Super Contest, where it could just be, it's a $5 GPP. It's the Millie Maker, right? $20 entry. And you have to pick, 14 over-under / spread bets, right? And compile, maybe 6 bets on a card or an 8-bet card. Like, it sounds like a DFS game, right? You're just, no salary or anything even. It's just like whatever. And then you look, the Vikings are a 15-point favorite over whatever. And then I could go, well, based on that, how many people are going to pick the Vikings? Is that the proper frequency that they should be picked on these cards? And is the underdog not going to be picked enough? And how could I maximize my chance of winning? And then they have a payout structure just like DFS. Like, I'm more inclined to wait for, like, I'm going to play DFS. And there's going to be some of they're going to get these prize picks and Monkey Night Fight. Like, they're trying to come out with little type of games. The hold is ridiculous. You shouldn't be playing them. And I want the peer-to-peer. Because, like, you're viewing it from a very, like, computer science driven. Like, we're going to build a system that is going to be better at these numbers than the books, than the public, and we're going to take our edge from that. And I'm viewing it from a perspective of, I'm never going to build that system, but I can figure out what mistakes everyone else is going to make And as long as they're making mistakes, I'll be there where the platform does not care. Now, they're not going to limit me. I'm not going to have to worry about getting money down. Like, they're going to take their 15% break or whatever the hell it is, and then let me beat the shit out of someone else at some betting game that they're like, oh, I got to pick the Cowboys and the over because, go boy, they're from Texas or something. And I go, okay, here's the best mean projection, whatever. There you go. And I'm going to win 62% of the time. We'll move on to the next one. And then play GPPs like that. Like, that product doesn't necessarily exist yet. But, like, you would understand from my perspective of how I play DFS that would appeal so much more to me, the peer-to-peer type of stuff. And in talking to you for the past hour, I understand much more now that, like, you view this as so much more of like just you're setting up a stock trading system of just like nope, just get the I just want to have the best numbers and plug it in, and if I get a 2.7% ROI or whatever, you just take your ATM card, we put money in, we get this much out, and you keep on creating and it doesn't matter who's playing the game, who's betting on anything. It's like when the number hits here, you bet that. When the number hits there, you bet that. And then you think you could build a better system than others. Like, it's shown that in soccer DFS you can, but it's just weird that we both play the same game on DraftKings for the past 7 years and like almost come at this problem from like the complete opposite sides.
Yeah. No, I think what you described there about like DFS 2.0 is really interesting as well, and I hope things move in that direction because I think it would be fun. But if those kind of competitions are going to require me to fly to, Nebraska or fly to Nevada to register, and I have to be there, and it's only like one entry per person, and it's going to be hard for me to write it into code, and that to me just doesn't seem as desirable, right? Because
no, but I'm talking about the regular DFS.
I can't solve that problem.
Right, but I'm talking about the regular DFS content. Like, it would be the picture soccer DFS, soccer DFS, and instead of 8 roster slots for players, we have 5 games, and it's like you have to pick 6, bets. Essentially, pick the money line, pick 3 money, and then
that would be really interesting. Yeah,
right?
But no one's done that yet, right? Like, and why not? I don't know.
Well, there is a site, No House Advantage, has games like that. The liquidity there sucks, but they have. Okay. I mean, it's not a good name of a site, but I've seen what they're doing. They're only available here in the U.S., I believe, and maybe some in Canada. In a couple of states, in like some states, they're banned and whatever. It's the whole U.S. DFS gambling laws and everything here. But they're trying to put together, like, they're making those types of games. I'm waiting for a bigger. I'm waiting for especially the U.S. companies to expand. They finally get into Texas and California, New York, and everywhere where now they're done with getting it be legal everywhere, that they could just go, okay, well, now how do we expand our offerings? And it's much easier from probably on the back end technically to not have DFS operations and just like, well, we already have everything. We already have, SB Tech or, obviously there are Canby books or whatever. We already have the tech that makes all the lines. It's like, why don't we just every day in the morning or the night before, when the lines open, we create all these type of like betting contests where you could, and the biggest attraction of DFS, we know amongst casual players, put in a little to win a lot of money. That's why you see all these people with same game parlays and 12-leg whatevers. And it's like, oh, I want to take $3 and win 3,000. It's like, well, what other way in sports betting can you really do that other than making these absurd parlays that the book keeps 58% of the money on or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, how about when they just take 15% rake, you put in $5, you could win 50,000 if you beat all the other people at whatever combination of bets you put. It's the same bets. The over on rebounds here and the under on some basketball slate. It's pretty much DFS. and it's easier to play than DFS because there's no salary. It could be a game with no salaries. It's a game that they already have all the lines made. I mean, like the DraftKings, like they don't need people to really do it. To me, it seems almost like an inevitability because it satisfies like the two main things. The operations is easy and it allows you to market. Do you want to turn $10 into $1 million? Like to me, it seems you just have to wait for it to happen, and hopefully the standard DFS game doesn't die by then. That like It's kind of weird. Like I'm looking into something that doesn't exist, going, I'm gonna focus on this peer-to-peer stuff as much as possible, so that when that happens, I could be the king of that. And you're looking and going like I'm gonna take everything I've learned from DFS, and now there's this big sports betting market with billions of dollars at play. It's like I'm going to take my little black box and I'm going to go out and try to take as much money as possible. And to me, I view your path to be much scarier than my path.
Yeah, maybe. I think I probably do as well. But yeah, I believe we're capable of doing it. We just have to keep going, right? And gradually take on harder and harder tasks. But Jordan, I think also a lot of our sports betting stuff is peer-to-peer as well, right? Like, you've got these betting exchanges, which are not big in the US yet, but they are big in the UK. And a lot of our golf action is just being matched with other people that want to take the other side of a Rory top 5 bet, this kind of thing. So it's not where companies like Betfair, they just take a percentage of the profit or the turnover, or they do it in lots of different ways. They find, just like the tax man, they find lots of creative ways to take a little bit, small slices of the cake here and there. But it's the same idea, right? They're just matching two people together and then taking a rake of the bet.
But do you really think the exchange? Do you really think the exchange model, like the thing that the exchange model, you need a lot of liquidity, especially here in the U.S. market. Especially if they like fence off states and stuff, but it still doesn't offer the second thing. Like to me, the most important part is, can someone bet $10 and win $1 million, or $20? So it can, like that milli maker on DraftKings, like that is what people think of. I talked to a casual person. You say DraftKings, and they play once in a while. It's like, yeah, it's the site that you can put in $20 and have you won the million yet? Like that, it's like that's what they view it. It's not what we play in double, that 25 into 50 and 10 into 18 for a head-to-head type of thing. So I view the exchange model as that type of, I want to bet plus 180 on this. That's not what I'm thinking of. The casual bettor is like I can tell you, they're putting together 8-leg parlays.
It's going to be tough for you to grind on that stuff, though, where the payouts are so top heavy, right? But I guess that's what you've been doing for the last 7 years, so you're used to it and you have the bankroll for it.
Right. Well, you do the same type of payout structure. You do that. Maybe it's not the milli maker, but why can't on a baseball day? Today's Major League Baseball, right? And it's like, well, what's your betting card of 8 bets? $10, and they have smaller. You don't need to have, and obviously I could put in 150 betting cards. I mean, we could just. It's the same thing as DFS. Just I view it as simpler because they could just teach people what sports betting. It's like, you're going to bet Chiefs -7. Like you don't have to say, well, the Chiefs defense is 2,300. If you want to roster Patrick Mahomes, he's this price, and then you have to put like they're done. It's just like I just want to bet the Chiefs in the over, and I want to bet a couple of other things. And I want to be able to turn $20 into a lot of money. Doesn't have to be $1 million, but 10,000 or something like that. And that's their form of entertainment. Like, why not have that game? They already know the bets that I want to bet the over on this and the under on that and the total and over 100 rushing yards for this. And like it's essentially DFS. It's just instead of the players, it's just a bunch of bets. And then all I have to do is figure out who's the public going to put in their cards more than others, and that's it.
Yeah. I hope it works out.
You don't sound that confident.
And I can see it being popular. Like these things take time. That's the other problem, right? And another another reason that we haven't doubled down on DFS and maybe got into other sports is because it's a risk to have, just like any company, right? If all of your money is coming from one client, right? If all of your money is coming from one market, we've seen DraftKings have just closed shop in Australia, right? Last year or something. If they did that in the UK, that would be a big problem for us, right? Like that would then be, if we hadn't diversified into other markets, that would then be 100% of our profit, of our revenue just gone.
Right? Did that happen with FanDuel with you guys? Right?
Yeah, but now FanDuel, they've reopened through Paddy Power in the UK,
Okay.
right? But it did. No, you're right, and it could happen again, and it could happen with DraftKings. And so we don't really want to leave ourselves in that kind of position, right? We are approaching this, as you've probably kind of sensed in this call, I think, Jordan, like we're trying to approach this a bit like a business, right? We're trying to build something long term here and gradually grow each year and also start to bring in people to help us. And yeah, hopefully we have something really great in 10 more years, you know. So if we did just have all our revenue come from DraftKings, it would seem like a very the Kelly would not be happy, right? That would be
Right.
the Kelly bet would disapprove strongly. And so we've tried to diversify a bit for that reason.
There's also the difference that in the sports betting markets or in the space that DFS there's no such really there's no well I'll put this lightly. There's really no such thing as a syndicate in DFS. There could be, it just would be against the terms of service, right, to do
Right.
so.
I don't even know what is a syndicate. How would you define a syndicate?
Well, if you want to play for more like 300 lineups, if you want to collude in three mans, if you like,
Okay, so that
if you're using a shared
so
bankroll amongst
multi-accounting is
multi-accounting, right?
syndicate.
Yeah, I would consider
So
that
a
to be
shared bankroll across shared accounts,
right.
basically, is what a syndicate is.
I would
Okay.
consider that to be
Whereas in our case, we are shared bankroll in one account, which is not a syndicate. Is
right.
that
That you're
right?
just playing
With
as
that
one user.
definition?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Because there's no
Yeah.
strat. Because you could have what you could have 7 backers, 20 backers. It's still only your play can only be through one account. So there's nothing that it negatively affects me based on. I don't care how many ways you guys split it up. Doesn't matter to me. But if I'm in an 11-man double up against 4 of your accounts, like there's a strategic advantage that you have. Like there has to be, right? Now it diminishes over at like how much of an edge do you have that you're going to put in multiple entries into 11-man double up? That's a different story. But like in sports betting, on the other hand, you have you could have partners. You could have, I mean, like you could expand to different sports and different markets. You could have 30 allies. You could obviously, people give you accounts. You could share action. You could fake out the market. I mean, there are obviously people that help each other fake out books, and this book copies that line. I mean, there's a whole bit. Like that's what it's saying. Like I know how all that works. That's the main reason, Will, why I don't want to get involved. That's like, to me, that's the like
Well,
I just
to
want to
be
play
fair,
against
it's kind of a
people.
side of sports betting I don't really want to get involved with either, right? Like all this, faking out stuff and having multi accounts. It's it's very profitable, I imagine, right? Like it's a good way to earn a living, but it's not why I've got into sports betting, right? It's not what makes me tick. Like I just like writing better code, right? I like coming up with better projections, and the more I can focus on that, I think the happier I am.
Yeah, but the hardest part is not necessarily beating the market. It's about getting the money down.
I know,
So
I
so
know,
but
and I
but
think
that
that's one thing as a business. If we are a business, I think that's one thing as a business that we suck at right now, right? Like people have talked about the three edges of sports betting, more or less, like, well, the three ways to be, the three main ingredients of sports betting. The one is having good data or better data, right? Like if you have better data than other people, that's an edge. Two is analyzing that data better than other people. right? That's an edge. And then 3 is trading that analysis better than other people,
Right.
right? And I think right now we're probably pretty good at 1 and 2, but not that good at number 3.
Yeah, but
And if
three
we
is
are to
three is
grow,
the
that's
shitty. But that's the reason why I don't like it. That's, to me, I'm more on your side on this. Is like, I'd like to just be able to do 1 and 2, and just be able to just like bet and let the market decide. And if I'm right, I'm right. I would make more money. If I'm wrong, I
yeah,
lose money. But that third one is what to me makes everything. It's not that anymore. It becomes like, oh, I could easily beat the market, but good luck getting more than $100 down, or good luck getting your money in and out over there. And like, it becomes from my experience, 90% of the work becomes that, and I don't find that interesting. I don't find the trading aspect to be the interesting part. I want to solve the problem. I want to go, yeah, this line should be minus 162, and it's minus 135, right? Here's $1,000. I mean, like, and then place enough of those bets, and at the end of the year, I get X amount of money. I mean, like, to me, that's the interesting part. But when
yeah,
to me, it would
yeah,
be so stressful if like you said, with diversified income streams. If I just was doing sports betting, obviously, if it was legal here, of course, there's offshore. You could, I mean, whatever. It would be so stressful to me. Like you said, DraftKings should just pull out of UK. Well, I view that the same as having accounts at sports books of like, you may be doing great, and next thing you know, you like half your accounts get limited, or like, oh yeah, I'll put 5,000 here, 3,000 there, 10,000 there, and then tomorrow it's like, oh, guy, I found 3 good MLB lines, and it's like, we have to prove you for anything more than $37. And it's like, and then you go to another book, it's like, we gotta prove you more than $16. And then you go to another, and then next thing you know, you're just sitting there going, well, what do I do for a living now? I better have partners.
yeah,
I better got like, and then it just seems to me, at least, that it becomes a cycle of like, you almost need to have a person as part of your business that's all they do is find
for
partners,
sure.
find
No, you do.
accounts, and do
That's a
that.
big part of the business. Yeah, it's a big part of the business. And some people are really good at it, right? And some people enjoy the hustle of that side of it, I think. And they have the street smartness to really operate in that area. It's just not for me. And it sounds like it's not for you as well.
No, it's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
I also
yeah,
will. I don't like people, so that hurts.
yeah. Okay.
Like having
Yeah.
like
Um,
I'm the type of
I think
person.
that hurts in pretty much any industry though, but perhaps sports betting less than others.
Right. I think a better way to put it is that I hate having to rely on other people.
Yeah.
I think that's a better way of like,
Yeah.
I think you could probably agree that with your projections and playing DFS, that like, when you know that it's like, if you do the work and you do the code and you put in the lineups and everything like that, it's like, I'd have no problem putting in bad lineups, completely fucking up, and going, yeah, I fucked up, and I got to get better. But it's worse when it's like, you didn't fuck up. It's because someone that you trusted in fucked up, and it's like, I think in terms of, well, if I just did it myself, it wouldn't have happened. So it's like, so why do I need the other person? Like, and that trust issue of, obviously you have a partner that you do trust, which is great, but in this type of lifestyle, it almost feels like most DFS players play as sole individuals, where they do all of the work, because it's like, it's my black box, and I don't see how anyone else could understand it as much as I can. And as long as I have the time, why shouldn't it be just me doing everything? And the detriment in that is that we see a lot of sharp players. I give advice to newer players to play on some of the smaller sites, because at least once a week on Yahoo or Super Draft or something like that for NBA or MLB, that someone will say, yeah, someone put 150 of the same dummy lineup in, like a sharp player, and it's like no, they didn't do that, and someone's asking me, did they do that strategically? I go, no, they were working on FanDuel and DraftKings, and lock hit before they got to fucking Yahoo, because they only have $5,000 of volume on Yahoo, and they have 50,000 on the other sites. So that just happened to get cut out. So it's like, and these are people trying to do it as one. They're playing all the slates, all the things, turbo slates, and all that type of stuff. But I could see that from a like a personality trait. Like I'd probably be the same fucking. I'd be like, I'd rather just forget about, because I've done that before. I've literally done that before. Trying to play on 2 or 3 sites, put together all my lineups of DraftKings for a basketball slate, and go, okay, I'm done. Right, 2 minutes before lock, I'm good. Whatever, and then lock hits, and I go, okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, whatever, and I go, oh shit, I have 150 lineups of FanDuel I forgot to do. Right, I just completely forgot about it.
Yeah, that's happened to me in real life. It also happens to me about once every month in my dreams or nightmares as well. Right? I've had so many, honestly, I've had like nightmares where it's like I've forgotten to edit my lineups before lock. It's crazy.
Do you at least put a dummy lineup that would be reasonable? So like maybe a min cash could like.
Usually.
Okay, because some people don't do. So I've had people say to me, like, oh my god, I forgot to edit my seat. Like I go, you didn't put in like a lineup that, or like in MLB or NBA, like what you do in MLB is if you're gonna make a dummy lineup just to enter contests, like put in like stack the latest game. So it's like at least if you miss lock, like you have all the games up until you can't. The 3 games that just lock you can't play, but at least you could create some type of correlated lineup with what's remaining. Or in the NBA, like it's a later. But if not, if you don't do that, like in soccer, like the first thing I like is this really nitpicky? That the first thing I do in soccer at an hour before lock, once all the starting lineups come in, is that I open up my main lineup, my cash lineup or whatever, and even if I haven't decided on anyone to play, like I'll just make sure that all the guys that I currently have in are starting. And if anyone's not, I just make sure that all the check marks are there, just in case, an hour from now, for some odd reason, I missed something or whatever, that I'm not stuck with fucking, backup forward or something that's not going to play.
Yeah. No, I think we're more likely just, if the code is all broken, then 10 minutes before kickoff, we just do that, right? We then go and manually edit the most important lineups.
Oh, has that happened before?
Code breaking? Yeah, I think so. Maybe a couple of times. We've actually had an issue this last week with database stuff, but thankfully that didn't result in us kind of making any big trading mistakes. It just meant that we couldn't trade for a while. But we have had a few nightmares in the hour before kickoff, I think, as well, where stuff is just breaking. But usually we can fix it, right? There's nothing like a 10 minutes till kickoff time pressure to like force the best out of you as a coder, like force you to think clearly and just figure out what the problem is and rectify it as quickly as possible.
This brings up something. This is the last question before you get out of here. I had things in my mind. Talking about strategy that I noticed about things that you've changed. If you want to call it strategy, like it's weird to call it strategy with what you do.
I probably won't. This will be the first I've heard of this change of strategy. Probably.
Okay, no, but I didn't know. I think this is something that would have to be more deliberate. One thing I've noticed. I don't know if I noticed it immediately or at some point, but in the past, if we go back 7 years, your main lineup, if you want to call it a cash lineup, would be in like everything. So you'd be in all the double ups, all the head-to-head. Like if I checked my head-to-heads and I checked the double ups and I checked the triple ups and I checked the single entry $12 whatever, it would be the same exact lineup. Now most cash players do that, okay? And I've always said to players that want to exploit that is that you should technically be building different lineups for different payout structure type of contests. So like if you knew that everyone was playing their double up lineup in a triple up, you would purposely play a different 2v2 so that when you win double off of your opponents when you normally would have only won once, because your opponents are playing that same lineup most likely, right? So strategically in quintuple ups or single entry, whatever, in the past year or so, you are doing that. you're playing different lineups in 3-man contests versus in double ups versus in, because I'll notice that because I'll go into different contests and see like, I'm beating Saramek by 20 points and then this $50 11-man double up, and then go into to a 3-man and you're beating me. Right?
I think double ups and 50-50 should be the same always. I think triple ups will be slightly different. Quintuple ups will be slightly different. It's just a question of like how much we tweak that variance parameter, right?
But you're answering the question that you actively are doing that, while most of the lobby doesn't do that.
Right, and okay, and then but sometimes even when we tweak the variance parameter, the optimizer will still like the same lineups of 50-50 and triple ups, right? It's not like we purposefully always have a different triple up lineup and a 50-50 lineup for like variance, to smooth out our swings or anything like that. It's just there are slightly different settings for every contest pretty much based on how high up the leaderboard you need to finish in order to get a decent payoff.
Right. So the way that you're calculating lineups for the large field, $18, $10, whatever the hell it is different than the 275 68-man or the king of the pitch or whatever. Like so you're actively
pretty much.
So you're actively catering the lineups to contests.
Correct. Yeah, and we do that even more in golf than we do in soccer.
Well, I could tell you from experience that in golf you're one of the few that I would consider that to be a considerable edge in golf. I don't know if you view it that way. What was the question?
Well, we do. Initially, we viewed golf and soccer very similarly, and then we realized that was costing us a lot more than we had originally thought. Right? Like game theory just seems so important in golf. I think partly it's because the salaries are so closely tied to their true projection that no one's really a bad pick. So in GPP, you really need to find the people that are lower, right? Because you're not going to be giving up that many points by doing that, and you're going to get the benefit of doing well when other people are doing badly if you're fading the most popular players.
Right, but the thing that I'm talking about, Will, is that like sharper multi-entry players, if you want to call them sharper, but like profitable, they may be profitable in other sports or whatever. A lot of times what they're doing, and it's mostly for time efficiency stakes, is they're building 150 lineups. So they're building 150 lineups for the drive to the green, whatever contest, the largest field contest.
Right.
But they're just building 150 geared towards that contest and then putting like their highest projected one into the single entries and the top 3 into the 3, and it's still 150 lineups that are built.
No.
Right. That's what I'm saying, that you're not doing that, but so you're playing a lot of lineups in the non-large field contests that are really, they were created for large field ownership, and like it was all for that. And they're most of the people that I talk to that do simulations, they run their own systems, their own little black boxes, do it like the way that you're doing it is the correct way of doing it. They're just, the juice isn't worth the squeeze type of thing from their perspective of where they're playing so much volume, so much everywhere. They believe their 150 lineups are plus EV no matter what contest it is, even though it's not the most profitable for the single entry high stakes contest. It's just so much easier for them to just make 150 set and then just put the top owned, top projected, top whatever way that the least leveraged lineup up there. But I've always said that like the ownership of these contests are different, right? Chalk gets chalkier in the smaller field, higher stakes contests. That it mathematically it doesn't make any sense that the lineups that would be the highest EV in the 150 max large field could be considerably negative EV, given the fact that, now all of a sudden you're playing 3 golfers that are 58% owned in a 100-man contest. And it's like, it's 150 plus person. It's a cut event. It's a full field. Like, should any golfer be that owned? I mean, like, that seems astonishing.
Yeah. And I think that counter to that would be, you're right from a mathematical perspective, but it's just the difference isn't big enough to justify rebuilding all those lineups, right? And I think I would have agreed with them a year ago, but now I'm starting to realize that actually the difference in EV is actually big enough, right? The difference in your bottom line in catering every lineup to every contest pretty much that you're entering is actually worth it. And at least with golf, unlike soccer, you have plenty of time to build your lineups, right? Barring some late withdrawal, you've got hours really to run everything. So it's probably worth it. The juice probably is worth the squeeze in that situation. Well, Jordan, I got to go. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I'm running out of time here, but I'm happy to do this again. It seems like we have a lot to catch up on in terms of the last 7 years of DFS, and it is enjoyable to reminisce and to talk it through with someone sharp like yourself.
Well, I'm glad to have the conversation. I'm sure a lot of soccer DFS players would be interested to hear about this conversation. So, people can follow you at Saramek21 on Twitter.
Yep, they can.
And as always, you can get the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.